it's Jen from Fabulous Paper Emporium, and welcome to my channel. Today we have a really exciting project that we are starting. This is going to be part one of a two-part series, and we are making an album with chipboard and obviously some cardstock and some bookbinding tape. Not really an area that I've explored much in the past, but we are going to do this. So I want to thank Paul Ford, who has done this many times over the years, and it's something that I've wanted to explore a little bit. So here's my tutorial on creating a 6 signature album, which we will be using to create a calendar album using A Year with My Gnomies by Photoplay. So here is basically the general layout, which is going to be all pages, all signatures are going to be the same. We're going to have a gatefold, but on top of this gatefold will go another piece which will house our calendar part. And that calendar part will flip out. There'll be a magnet, will flip out, and we'll have all kinds of space for journaling, for photos, etc. So hopefully you'll join me for that. Stick with me and I'll walk you through the entire process. Here we go. Okay, so as promised, we're doing something a little bit different today, in the sense that the building of our album just uses 2 very simple things. Tape, bookbinding tape to be specific, and our chipboard. And I've not really built albums like this before, so today is kind of a first. I have built something like this before, just kind of doing a test run, and I want to see longevity, how it stays together. So and I do have to thank Paul Ford for many of his tutorials, because I believe that this is kind of his preferred method. So we'll see how quickly this goes, and yeah, we'll get right to it, I guess, is what I'm going to say. So I've got my 3 pieces of chipboard. We've got 1 piece for the spine, and it's a very large spine. If you aren't aware or don't know, there's a collection from Photoplay called A Year with My Gnomies. It's by no means a new collection, but this is what I'm using this album for. It's going to ultimately be like a 1-year album. So every page, there's going to be a month. Well, one side of the signature will be 1 month, the next side will be the other. So 6 signatures, A Year with My Gnomies. I've had this forever. I've had it in the store forever. And so now is time, it's high time that it get used. So we are going to start off with 2 pieces of chipboard, 7 by 7. Okay, we've got 1 piece, 4 by 7. This will be our spine. Like I said, 6 signatures. I want to give plenty of space to add to my wonderful agenda, I guess, is what it could be called. And then, like I said, some bookbinding tape. I'm using 1 inch. I got it off of Amazon. I am now contemplating, I think I have a 2 inch or a 2.5 inch. And I'm contemplating that one. It's got a little bit more shine to it, which I think is why I've shied away from it. And it is a 2 inch one, but in doing so, it will give you more of a border. And I did, in one instance, kind of make a bit of a boo-boo. So you'll see, we'll talk about it. Yeah, I'm still shying away from the 2 inch because I'm really not fond of the shine that it gives. So I'm going to use the 1 inch, and as we go through, I'll tell you where you need to kind of be very careful. So with your chipboard, one thing I want to mention, if you are new to album making, then there's something you need to be aware of, is chipboard has flexibility when you turn it a specific way. Like it's very flexible this way. And when I turn it, it's not very flexible when I turn it. So the grain of the chipboard goes a very specific way. When you are building your album, in this case, it's 7x7, so it really doesn't matter how you're cutting it specifically. But when you're building it, you want to make sure that the non-flexible way is how you have your cover. So basically, this is going to be the top, right? This is the bottom. Whoops, bottom. And I do that to my pieces so that while I'm working with them, I don't get turned around, because that would be very easy to do. And you don't want to have the very flexible way going this way and having, because with all the times that you open and close it, it will start warping after a bit. So you really want the more rigid way to be, you know, positioned in this way. So, you know, I try to bend it back and forward, and so you want to have it laid out like this. With your spine, this is where it kind of comes into where cutting it really does matter, is you also want your spine to be more rigid, and the flexibility is this way, is on the length, not on the width. And this way, your book really won't be folding this way, and you want the more sturdy side to be your spine. So just something to note, and I'm going to quickly just go like that, because I always do top bottom. If you do, you know, left right, that's totally fine. So I'm going to set 2 pieces aside. I'm going to go with one of my covers, and to get started, we are going to roll out some of our bookbinding tape like so. I'm going to start at one end. So again, I have my arrows going in the proper way, and I'm going to lay the bottom edge along the tape, and I'm going to spin it. So I'm walking my chipboard down my bookbinding tape. I'm going to need to roll it out some and do one more side. I'm only doing 3 sides total. That's it. We leave one side open, and then I take my scissors, cut that off as close as I possibly can to the chipboard, and this is what you have. So I'm going to come back in. I give a little bit of a pinch just to, you know, turn the rounded corners into like a proper corner. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove bulk from the corners. So in order to do this, I'm going to get my pretty scissors out. I'm going to cut into the corner. You want to go close to the edge, like close to the chipboard, without being right on the chipboard. So I'm cutting all of my corners like that. I gotta stop to peel off the bookbinding tape. But it doesn't have to be huge. Just a little pizza slice. That's it. Just like so. And when you have all of your edges done, so this is kind of what it looks like. There's just four corners to do. I'm going to start at the top. Doesn't really matter where you stop, but I'm going to start by making sure that the top, that we have good connection between our tape and our chipboard. And then I just kind of make like a pinching motion, and I gradually go down to make sure, you want to do it gradually to make sure that you don't have a lot of buckling. Plus, like right here, I had a little bit that was needed to just be pulled back a little bit so that you're not crumpling everything in all at once. And I'm going to do that on all 3 sides. So I start off with the motion to make sure that I get it all started and it's nice and flat. And as we push it down, so does the tape. The tape becomes nice and connected. You can take your bone folder at this point and just make sure that we have that tape nicely burnished on all sides. And we're going to repeat that with the other cover that we already have cut. That's 7 by 7. So I'm going to bring that in. We're going to roll out our tape again. So again, sticky side up. Ugh. And then start at the bottom or the top, doesn't really matter. So we start and we just walk our chipboard down. When you have to roll it out again, hold your chipboard where your tape is, closer to the tape, because if you hold it at the top, chances are this chipboard is not going to be strong enough and it just won't work. So I tried it and the tape got torn off the chipboard and I had to start all over again. So, okay. So now that we have our front and back done, again, front and back. Now that we have all 3 sides done, I'm just going in, pinching the corners a bit, and then cutting out. If you happen to cut too much, you may see your chipboard. So if you're used to kind of the traditional way of building your album cover with paper, double-sided tape, and your chipboard, you when you're cutting the corners, you cut on an angle to get rid of the bulk. Then you are just going to that's what we're doing here. So you don't want to go all the way to, all the way into that corner. You want to leave a bit of space so a bit of the tape is showing. If you happen to have, I've only ever seen black bookbinding tape. Maybe there's other colors out there. I'm not aware of other colors, to be quite honest. And so if you are using black and your album is going to be black, then and you found that you've cut too close and now some of your chipboard is showing, you can easily take a black Sharpie and cover it and nobody would be the wiser. So just a little tip or trick about that. And so I'm doing the exact same thing as what I did on my first piece, which is to just gradually press down my tape. So I didn't do a very good job of getting it right in the middle, which is fine. But just know that when it comes to covering the coverage that we are ultimately going to be putting on here, so your cardstock, whether you're going to do solid and then pattern on top or just do pattern, you're just going to have to take this into consideration when doing your pieces. So just something to note. Now when we bring in the spine, we're doing something a little bit different. We are going to be cutting off. We are just going to be pushing this down. We're covering the top and the bottom, and that's it. The sides will be covered when we attach the front covers, the front and back covers. That's right. These scissors have not been cleaned in quite some time. So, and because I use it for all of my tape related things, they're kind of gummy now. So, but I don't want to risk using my new scissors because they're new. But if there is any tape that hangs over the edge, don't worry, you can just go back and cut that off afterwards. Don't worry if it's not all the way to the edge. It is totally fine because it will be covered ultimately with the sides, how we connect them. So, and you'll see that in just a second. So I've got my two sides done. And now we get to connect everything. So it comes together rather quickly, which is great for those of us who are pretty impatient. So for doing the connections, now we're going to, we are going to extend the tape roughly 1 inch above. It keeps on wanting to roll towards me. So above where the top end of your cover is, we're just going to want to extend the tape about 1 inch above and 1 inch below. So that gives us 1 inch to wrap around. I usually go, I try to be as generous as I possibly can. So I do that. And then we are going to put this similar to what we did here. I'm going to apply this about to the halfway mark and press that down. Then we are going to take this piece and lay it on top. And there is method to this madness. There is madness, no, definitely method to the madness, not the other way around. I'm going to spin this around and I'm going to bring it up. And I'm pressing down on the ends to make sure that they've made contact with the bookbinding tape. And then I'm going to bring that over carefully, not putting any pressure on the little bits that are extending past because we don't want them to get stuck together. So in doing this, we've now created a bit of a space. And so the space here is basically equal to the two of the pieces of chipboard. So I'm pulling it apart because I don't want the tape to completely surround the inside of the chipboard. So like that, I don't want it completely inside. And then I'm going to grab each side and carefully pull that over. You want to carefully do that. Sometimes you see it puckering because it's in the little groove, and that's fine, but you don't want to create any more I don't want to create any more I don't even know. My brain's not working right now. Don't want to create any more. Wow. The word is just gone. It was there and now it's gone. But you want to lay it as flat as you possibly can, basically is what I'm trying to say. All right. So we have our first hinge. We will be coming back and putting a little bit more tape here. So don't worry about that. You're not going to have exposed tape, but we're going to do the same thing to connect our other cover. So we have about 1 inch at the top, 1 inch at the bottom. If it's more, it's not a big deal. And we're going to duplicate exactly what we did, provided I can get this off my finger. Or not. There we go. If you don't, it's not a big deal. Okay, so I'm moving that over to the middle, roughly middle-ish. I'm going to lay this on top, squaring up the corners. And then I'm going to bring this up. Sorry, got to move that over a little bit. Make sure that's all aligned. Tilt this upwards. Make sure that our Making sure, whoops, I'm bringing down everything. Making sure that our cover is well connected. And then folding it over without pinching those ends. And we are done. So gently fold over our little tabs, making sure we don't have any creases. That was the word. I knew it was going to come to me sooner or later. And then I'm just going to take my bone folder, burnish that down. So like I said before, we're now going to take a little bit of tape and I'm going to come in and cover. I wouldn't go higher really than, you know, just overlap it just a bit. And I wouldn't go too far up because then you're going to see the extra layer of the bookbinding tape when it comes up to the top. So just, and I'm trying to align it as much as possible, but you also don't want to have gobs and gobs of tape. So if you can avoid having a lot of overlap, then that would be great. We're just going to press that down. And just like that, we have our book. So the cover of our album, at least, is done right now. We are now going to get to the cardstock portion of our assembly. So the tutorial today is going to go through the entire building of said album when it comes to the building of it. And then my next part, in part 2, we're going to bring in the beautiful cardstock, the patterned cardstock, and go from there. I'm grabbing my scoreboard. So whatever tools you're going to need to score, we've got quite a few score marks in order to make the hinge. Again, if you're new to album making, the hinge is where your signatures or pages are going to attach. So we need some cardstock in order to build this. And because we're doing 6 signatures, you are going to need 2 pieces of cardstock. So the first piece of cardstock is 9 1/4 by 6. The second piece of cardstock is 6 1/4 by 6. Okay, and then these 2 pieces are going to attach and we'll go from there. But beforehand, we're going to be scoring. So with the 9 1/4 inch side at the top, we are scoring at 1 3/4, at 2 1/2, at 3 1/4, at 3 3/4, at 4 1/2, 5 1/4, 5 3/4, 6 1/2, 7 1/4, 7 3/4, and 8 1/2. Okay, so if you'll notice, other than the tab here, we go 3/4, 3/4, 1/2, 3/4, 3/4, 1/2. So the 3/4, the 2 3/4 panels are what we are going to fold, and that's going to create our hinge to connect to our pages. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to create 2 more with another tab so that we can connect the 2. So with your other piece, this one is 6 1/4 by 6. We are going to start at 3/4 of an inch, and then 1 1/4 at 2, 2 3/4, 3 1/4, 4, and 4 3/4. So we have on this side, we have our 3/4 inch tab, and that will connect to our other piece. And then we have 2 more signatures. So that makes a total of 6. Okay, so before we attach, before we do any of that stuff, I'm going to bring in my mat because I don't need to score right now. All of the scoring for these 2 pages is done. So don't worry when it comes to attaching the 2 sheets of paper together, 2 pieces of cardstock that are all scored. It's going to fit into one of the signatures, which is why they're 3/4 inches. So you're really not going to see where the 2 sheets have been attached. So you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to grab my 1/2 inch score tape and we are going to do some application. So I'm going to flip over my cardstock. So this is where there's a raised little bump when it comes to where we've scored. And I'm going to be applying my score tape in all, not all, but one of the 2 areas where we're going to be creating our signatures. So on the back side, we have a 3/4 inch. I'm just going to, so 3/4, because I know black is, you're not going to be able to see any of this. And so for anybody who is new at this, I just want to make sure that this is clear so that you don't have any frustrating moments. There. So we have 3/4, 3/4. This is our tab, so we're going to ignore that. So I'm going to be applying tape in one. So where the 2 3/4 come together, they're going to basically be glued together. So I'm just going to take my score tape and apply it in between the 2 score marks. Okay. It's challenging to see though. So make sure you have some good light. So I applied it to the first one. I skip the 3/4, the 1/2, and I go to the next 3/4. Next 3/4 inch panel. And then I skip the following 3/4, the 1/2, and I'm back on the first 3/4. And then I'm going to apply it to this one as well. Oh boy. Okay. So this is how this is going to be basically like the inside workings of your hinge. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing to my other one. So without writing on them, I'm going to do that one and that one, right? Because this is our 3/4 inch tab that's going to attach the 2. And we're going to go through how to do that in a minute. So that one and this one. Okay, and there. Just get that burnished down really well. Okay, so where we're going to go next is I'm going to fold all of my score lines now. And so where we had the 3/4 inch, I'm just going to mark the 3/4 inch with an X, and I'm marking them close together because you're not going to see the top of that. So I'll show you in a second. So basically I'm going to fold the score line that's between those 2 X's. I'm going to make sure that they are that I'm folding this, keeping my left and right sides aligned. I don't think I did a very good job. There we go. And then I'm going to come back and kind of press to get either side scored, or I'm going to create the valley on either side. So we've got a mountain where the hinge is going to attach to the signature or the page, and then we're going to have a valley on either side. So I'm going to do the same thing to my next, in between my next two X's, is I'm going to spin that around just because it's easier for me to see from here. Okay, get that burnished well. And then I come down and I can feel with my fingers, like the paper definitely wants to fold on those lines. And so now we have what will be two signatures. And you see where we did or applied the double-sided tape, the score tape, that is just going to tape together. So if you had it on both sides, it really would be just kind of a waste of score tape. You don't need to have a double piece there. Okay, and now we're going to continue on using the same folding pattern. Okay, and then come up. And then our last one. The last one may be a little bit tricky just because there's not as much to grab onto, but I'm just going to go down that line like so. Okay. And so we've got one sheet done. I'm still not going to attach it quite yet. And here is my second sheet with all of my X's. I'm not worried about this little tab on that side. I'm just going to continue on. So I folded it. Now I'm going to come back over. Okay, and then same thing on this last one. Okay, perfect. So everything is folded. We just have this little tab to adhere to our piece right here. So there's two ways that we can adhere our tab. And it's either going to be on the inside or on the outside. Bear with me just 1 second. I should have folded this already, burnished that. Okay, so this can either, like I said, attach to the outside or can be popped inside. Whichever way you want to do it is totally fine. If you're putting it on the inside, which is, certainly one way that you could do it, you're just going to have to trim off a little bit here so that when you are applying, that you also want to make sure that it's going to move freely. It's also why I'm not a huge fan of doing it on the inside, because I feel like this part it can rub here if you're not super careful. So I'm going to do mine on the outside. So right here, I'm going to apply some more of the double-sided tape. You can apply it to the back side if you want to, but this way, I know I'm going to put it on the proper way. Okay. And I am putting it closer to what would be the top part of the hinge. I want it to be well secured. And then I'm going to pull off some of the score tape. This way I can get this aligned the way I want to without having the entire piece. So I can move this around because I haven't stripped it of all of the adhesive backing. So once I have that aligned, I can tap really gently. I feel like that's not quite where I want it to be. You can also apply, if you're nervous about using double-sided tape because of how tacky it is, you can apply some liquid glue. So you could easily pull this off, apply some liquid glue, and it would give you a little bit of wiggle room. Not as much as if you were using liquid glue, but it would give you some chance at making sure that it was in the proper place. So I like it right there. I think that's a really good spot. So I'm gently pushing my fingers kind of together. I've got one finger on the inside, one on the outside. And as I pull, I'm just pushing the pieces of cardstock together. And this way, the risk of having it move is lessened. It's, maybe not a perfect science, but it works for me anyways. So now I've got all my pieces. I've got all of that connected. I've got my beautiful hinge system in the works. And now we can come in, pull our adhesive backing off the inside, and smush them together. Okay. And we're going to go do that down the line. I was going to say across the line. Okay, so this is what your hinge should look like now. Okay, we've got a nice flat bottom. That's where we're going to install it. That's how we're going to install it, I should say. So this is going to be placed in our books like this. And so in order to make sure that we also have our hinges ready to be adhered to our signatures, we are also going to need to apply double-sided tape to each side of our hinge system. So in order to do that, I'm going to go with, I usually like doing about 1/8 of an inch less than the size. So for these hinges, they are 3/4 of an inch. So I would usually use a 5/8 of an inch tape, which I'm not sure that I have out, which is weird because I usually have a 3/4 of, sorry, 5/8. Oh, that was 5/8. Never mind. Doesn't have the size written down anywhere. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. So, you could use narrower score tape if you have 1/2 inch. I don't think that'll be a problem. This is just my preferred method of doing it. And when you are applying the score tape, you really want to get to the very top of the fold and leave yourself at least an 1/8 of an inch at the bottom. And this way your pages can turn, right? Because if this is like this, if your signature, which won't be installed flat with the bottom, if it was, your pages wouldn't turn very well. There would be a lot of resistance. So we're going to go down the line. Obviously, I went above the score mark a little bit. That's not a problem. You definitely would prefer to err on the side of caution and be higher than lower. So you're going to go across each of your hinges and do both sides. Okay, so now that all of our hinges have the score tape applied all the way as far to the top as you possibly can, we are also going to apply some score tape to the back. And here's kind of where things or opinions differ. Some people like covering it. Some people will just do bits. I have changed and really do like to cover as much as I possibly can. So I'll start at one end. And then I'll work my way down, making sure that I try to cover as many of the hinges as possible. I just feel like it adds more. It may not. I don't really know. But you can push them down. So don't worry. Just make sure that you're not completely crumpling them and you've got them going all in the same direction. So I'm initially going to go and cover the majority, and then I'll probably come back with a little bit more score tape or double-sided tape, whatever you're planning on using. I would not recommend doing this project with liquid glue, a liquid adhesive, because the dry time, you know, it would take quite a bit of drying, and in the long run, I don't know that it's going to stay as secure as you're probably going to need it. So I just went through with my 5/8 tape, and then I'm just going to kind of fill in the gaps with my 1/2 inch. It doesn't have to look pretty because nobody's going to see this part of it. Only you will know. I don't know if this is going to fit. That's a little bit wider. So I'm going to go down to my 1/4 inch. Leave no hinge left behind. Everything's covered. Okay, so now that our entire back is completely covered, there is one thing that I would like to do before we go ahead and apply it to our cover, because as you'll notice, it bothers me that when they're all the way down on one side, there is a gap right between where the bookbinding tape is and where our hinge starts, particularly because there is going to be a 1/2 inch at the top, 1/2 inch at the bottom. So unless I was like bang on precise, I was likely not going to actually have my tape go to where I needed it to. So you could use wider tape, or the simpler solution is to cut yourself a piece of cardstock. So here's our piece that is 3 3/4 by 6 3/4. So that'll cover everything. And then 2 pieces for either side. And these are both 6 3/4 by 6 3/4. So up to you whether or not you want to use solid cardstock on either end. But because the hinge system is not going to cover everything, it's your top layer. So if you're using patterned cardstock or solid, on top of this, it will absolutely cover everything. So it's entirely up to you whether or not you want to put the side pieces on. If you're not wanting to use solid and you're wanting to use pattern, I just want you to stop here and kind of maybe figure out how you're going to want to lay this out, and then kind of go from there. So, but here's where you can bring in your liquid adhesive, whatever glue you're using. I'm using some Barely Art, which is not unlike the art glitter glue, if you're a fan of that. I just, with how cold it gets, if you know about the art glitter will freeze and is not very useful after, because it does change changes the glue. So, which is why I use the Barely Art, because it can be shipped in the middle of winter and be okay. So anybody in Canada or, you know, the northern US will probably know all about the Barely Art glue. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply this to both covers, the front and back cover as well. And then we can go ahead and install our hinge. And then the first part is done. Doing my best to make sure that I've got like an equal border. It's black on black, so I feel like this color scheme is less noticeable if you're off a little bit. Whoa. Just make sure you've got your pieces all adhered. Now when it comes to the installation of the hinge, I like using the Score Pal mat. If you don't have the mat, then you can easily use the cutting board like what I have underneath, because you can align things. So you are going to completely remove all of the adhesive backing off of our hinge. And once all of that's done, we are going to apply it into our album as straight as possible, because this will also affect, you know, kind of how your pages turn, but like in the sense of how they lay flat, but that is pretty much it. So okie dokie, almost done. Okay, so again, if you wanted to, if you were so inclined, you could add some glue to the score tape as I drop it. It will give you a bit of a buffer. You don't have to add a ton, but I would kind of add it. Okay, when I say everywhere you've added score tape, like I don't mean like you don't have to cover it like you did to the score tape, but just add it so that you have it pretty much everywhere. You don't have like a huge blank space in the middle, because you're likely not to, you know, that's probably where I would press down, and then I'd be kind of stuck in whatever position I put it down. So you're basically just wanting to leave a 1/2 inch at the top and the bottom, because our album cover is 1 inch, higher than the size of our hinge system. So roughly a 1/2 inch at the top and the bottom. If you want to mark that out, that's absolutely perfectly fine. And when I'm satisfied with how this looks, it doesn't look overly crooked, I'm going to set it down, grab my bone folder, make sure that I have good contact everywhere, and then with my dull end, just gonna come in between the hinges. Make sure we have it well adhered. Okay, so it's installed. We can now fold. So I'm just going to, it folded a little bit easier when we were without the paper, but with the paper, we're going to have to train it a little bit. and show it that it needs to fold on the inside. So I would really recommend, I'm just using this part of my bone folder, not the tip, because we don't want to have any holes. And just slowly bring up the cover, front or back. And as I do, I'm just kind of going over it very gently with my bone folder. So now we actually have the beginnings of an album, just like that. Okay, so next part is signatures. So let me get the cardstock and I'll be right back. Okay, so the next part to create are going to be our signatures. And so for this, you are going to need, I've done all my scoring and stuff like that, so I'll just lay this out a little bit flatter. So you're going to need 6 pieces of cardstock. You're going to need 6 that are cut at 7 1/4 by 6 1/4. And you're going to need 6 that are cut at 6 1/4 by 6 1/4. Now, with the ones that are cut longer, so 7 1/4, we are just simply going to score 1/2 inch on either side, and we're going to get those to be folded in. You're going to want to burnish them really, really well. We want them to lay as flat as possible. Now, I'm using, for my signatures, I've gotten into the habit of using 110 pound. We are layering all kinds of beautiful designer cardstock that is really nice weight. So if all you have is 65 pound, if all you have is 80 pound, that is totally fine. You do not have to use the thicker of the two. So basically this is what it's going to create, is a pocket, because we are going to slip the one end over the little hinges that we've created, and this other end, once we have this all taped down, then becomes a pocket. It's super cool if you haven't already done it. And if you have, then I'm giving you information that you already know. So I'm just getting out my tape. So again, I'm going to use 3/4 of an inch double-sided tape. I'm using my score tape. And we are taping, I know it's going to look weird. This, for whatever reason, when I first started making albums, was a little bit more challenging for me to wrap my head around. And I guess it's because I just had obviously never made an album before. So these two, your 1/2 inch sides fold inwards, and then this piece is actually going to go on top, thus creating your pocket. You can do, if you've already made albums before, please go ahead and do how you normally make them. That is totally fine. This is kind of like, I don't know, I've done a number of albums. I've done this application a few different ways. I've done it where I peel back both the bottom of both sides, and then I stand it up, get it all aligned, lay it down, and then I can pull either side. That totally works. For me though, sometimes I found that obviously my hands would shift as I move them down, and it just, anyways, it just didn't work for me all the time. But this method seems to be working pretty well for me, so it's how I'm doing it. So on my Score Pal, there's a lip, and so I can push this basically into the corner, the top and the bottom. So I peeled back a bit of one side. I'm only going to do one side at a time. And so once I have it secured on the bottom left, I'm just going to reach in and peel that back slowly. And again, I want to do it slowly because I do not want to shift it at all. So now I have one side done. I'm going to peel this other side back. Again, just starting at the bottom. You can fold that over. And as I bring this part up, again, I adhere the two, and then you have your pocket. If for whatever reason you feel like there's a little bit that hangs over and you want to trim it, by all means, but you can certainly take your scissors, carefully trim the side, because you obviously don't want to cut through and make a hole. Then it's not quite as pockety as you might want it to be. So you're going to do this 6 times. Okay, I've got all my 6 signatures here. And then we can go ahead and install them. I prefer to install my signatures and decorate them while they're in the album. And I feel like there's less possibility for me personally to mess up where the direction of this, because if you are working on these outside the album, which is again totally an option, you are wanting to keep these pocket, like the insert where it's open, on the left and the right. You don't want to keep it at the top because it's going to be installed like so. So anyhow, I just wanted to make sure that that was mentioned. And yeah, so I just feel like for me personally, I have less issues with that. So to install, so these are going to install rather snug on the left and the right, but this is basically what it's going to look like. Like I was mentioning when we were actually designing and creating our hinge, you are not pushing this all the way to the bottom. Then turning and flipping your album will become very difficult, and you'll start to see that at the very bottom of your signature, it's going to start curling slowly. So you don't want that. But that's also why we didn't put the tape. There's a bit of a space at the very bottom. That is to allow our signature to kind of hover a little bit. So that's just the explanation for that. So when I am going to install my first signature, there is going to be this gap at the bottom. So before I kind of put it on fully, I'm going to do what I was doing previous, and that's just to take a bit of the score tape, peel it back, and then fold it on both sides. And it is a bit tricky. I do see people who peel the double-sided tape all the way back. And then you can put on your glue, again, which gives you a little bit of time to sort out the positioning. So, don't know, there we go. Okay, so I like folding it one way or the other, sorry. And that way I know if it's square, if I need to kind of adjust it a little bit. And once I like where it is, so on this side, I've already got it tacked down because I like that. So I'm going to pull that down just a bit. And again, very gently pulling this tab out. Again, I feel like if you're going to take any amount of time, take your time doing this. In all likelihood, do not worry if it's off a little bit, like in the sense that you fold it this way. If it's up a little bit higher or down a little bit higher, it's a handmade item. So I feel like looking for complete 100% perfection is unrealistic, and it's only going to just make you frustrated. So Anyhow, so I like where that is. I'm going to continue pulling that out and applying a bit of pressure. So I'm applying the score tape is adhering on this side first. As you get to the end, you do have to finagle it a little bit and coax it out. And the reason for that is because it's very tight quarters, but it does come out. It can come out in one piece. I have had it where I ended up tearing the end because I feel like I'm Houdini and I just rip it off and it doesn't work. So I'm just going to fold that back, or you can easily spin this around so you have a better vantage point. Pull that out. It really isn't going to move anywhere at this point. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. Usually there's at least one that catches and it, you know, misbehaves. But, oh, I almost lost that one. We've got a little tear there, but that's fine. So we're going to continue on. I'm going to continue on doing the rest of my signatures. And then we will do the other base pieces, even though they might not be going on, all of them may not be going on the signatures directly. We're going to cut everything. We're going to score everything because, you know, the designer paper is coming up. It's coming up very quickly. So I'm going to get to the rest of this, installing my signatures, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are. We are done with the installation of our signatures. It's looking more and more like an album. Very albumy, if I do, do say so myself. And because I'm doing, because I'm doing all of the signatures the same, maintaining continuity throughout the entire album, all of the signatures are going to be designed exactly the same. So what I'm doing now is we're going to have a gatefold on the front. And so we are going to need some more pieces, as pieces fly all over the place. I just realized that this has a little bit of cardstock. There we go. So we are going to need a total of 24 of these pieces. So this is cut currently at 3 5/8 by 6 1/4, and you're going to score at a 1/2 inch on one side. Okay, so that's going to create half of the gatefold. And so, which is why we need 24. We need 2 per side. And since there's 12 months in a year, 2 times the 12 is going to equal 24. And so this is how it's going to lay out. We're going to use double-sided tape to place these on the front of each signature. And then to house the actual calendar for each month, this piece is going to go on the front of that, and this is going to flip open, just adding more real estate to your album and allowing more areas for journaling, for pictures, and what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll apply these now. The calendar flip, so in order to create this little flip situation, so this is only going to, because you may be thinking to yourself, how are we going to open the gatefold if this is attached? This calendar part is only going to be attached to the left side panel or the right side panel, depending on where, I think it depends on where the album, I want these basically flipping to the outside. So on these pages, which would be your odd pages, it's going to flip to the right, and on the even pages, it's going to flip to the left. And that way it gives you lots of room to flip it out. And so to create these little beauties, let me grab my sheets wherever they are. I had them right here. I think I just toppled everything over. So you are going to need 12 pieces that are 6 by 6.5, scored at a 1/2 inch on one side of the, so you would put it basically, let me set this aside, put it in your scoreboard with the 6.5 inch across the top, and you'll score it at a 1/2 inch. Or if you're like me and prefer giving yourself lots of space to score, you score it at 6 and it would still work, right? But you're only doing it on one side. And then you're going to need another 12 pieces that are 6 by 6. And this way your calendar pieces are going to fit really nicely on this. We are going to trim a little bit of the calendar pieces, and we'll get there, we'll get there eventually. Okay, so for the getting back to the gatefold part, I like starting to apply the gatefold on the outside. And the reason for that is I feel like the outside, I really want to pay attention and make sure that everything lines up really nicely. And this way, if this one is a little bit, comes off a little bit, it's not at all noticeable. So I'm going to peel back a little bit of the adhesive backing. I am going to grab, though, a little piece of white cardstock, because I do find it easier, especially when I'm working with black cardstock, to be able to see what I'm doing when I don't have layer upon layer of black cardstock. So it gives me kind of an area to focus on. Okay. When you like it, I'm just going to press down here, grab the tab, and as I pull back, we're going to go in behind with one of our fingers and just press down. Okay, so that's one part of my gatefold done. I'm going to spin this around. Don't really need the white cardstock here for this part, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm just pulling it back a little bit, and I'm going to line these up as best I can. And again, press my finger down to where I have it pulled back. And as I pull this back, I'm going to just come back and make sure it stays put. So that is gatefolds, right? If you've done the cards, you know exactly what a gatefold is. If there ends up being a little bit of space, it really is not a big deal. We're putting some gorgeous paper on here. So if there's a little bit peeking out of the base, that's not the end of the world. So, and when we put our decorative cardstock here, it's going to cover up our seams that we have. And then when we have our calendar flip pages, which is why we're not installing these right now. We're not installing these right now because I want to put on decorative paper, or at least the solid that comes with the designer. A Year with My Gnomies, there is a solid cardstock collection that goes with it. So I'm going to want to put that down first and then put this on top. There is a little bit of a border. If I grab this, you'll be able to see it a little bit at the top. There is going to be a little bit of a border around the outside. So you'll see the colors. And of course, when you flip this open, you'll be able to see it here. And then I think on the inside, I'm going to use a bunch of gorgeous decorative paper. So the outside will be a little bit solid. So that's the plan. So I'm going to go ahead, install the rest of my gatefold, and that is likely where we're going to end things, but I'll be right back. Okay, so all of the gatefold pieces are all in. Our album is looking very albumy. And that's where I'm going to end things for part 1. So for part 2, my plan is then to start laying the decorative paper on within the album and on the cover. Then we are also obviously going to install our calendar flip pages. So that will be part of that as well. You will need magnets. I've been toying with the idea of using magnets or ribbons. The ribbon closures, the only thing with the ribbon closures would be that you would have the ribbons on the inside, not on the outside. So I think I'm going to leave ribbons or seam binding closures for another day. But so magnets, decorative paper, obviously your adhesives, that kind of thing. So hopefully you are excited about this project. Hopefully you've learned something, you found it informative or inspiring in some way, shape, or form. If you have any questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comments below. If you have any comments or feedback, I'd love to hear from you just as much. And I certainly hope that you are a subscriber. If not, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would really, really, really appreciate it. Other than that, hopefully you have a fabulous rest of your day and you stay safe and well. I'll see you next time. Bye.